record on this computer. Okay. Well, we're recording, and I can see everybody on the screen. Whether if your picture's off, I can't see you, but I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the Grey Bruce Sustainability Network and our series sponsors that include, among others, Bruce Power and Ontario Power Generation and Enbridge. And I'd like to welcome you to the really the first in the series. We had an introduction a couple of weeks ago, and tonight is the first in the series. The focus in the next couple is energy efficiency and renewable energy and those sorts of things, primarily focused on residential. And I would really like to just send a shout out to all the folks that are part of the team tonight, Vitold and Simona and Kevin Moyes and Lee Grigg, all of whom are helping present these events, both in the background and in the foreground. And the format tonight is going to be similar. We're asking people to be muted during the events. If you have questions, just type your question in the chat box, and Simona will filter them out and avoid repetition, and we'll answer those questions after the first video. There's two videos tonight, and actually before I get into that, I am just going to introduce the series host and really the mastermind behind all these events in terms of local people who are doing great things in support of sustainability. All the way from Chatsworth, please welcome Vitold Kruetzer. Over to you, Vitold.
Thanks, Barry, and thanks for everyone coming on this evening. It's a good thing we didn't have to travel based upon the squalls that were running through the area, but thanks very much for being here tonight. Tonight will be our first of two sessions that will be talking on the theme of home energy efficiency. We decided to visit two homes that we would classify as off-grid homes. A lot of people have various ideas of what it means to be off-grid. It means different things to different people, and people go off-grid for various reasons. But I have to say, it's not just disconnecting from our electricity grid system and to be independent and to live in the same way as you would, no matter if you were hooked up or not. Off-grid usually is associated with lowering one's environmental footprint. There is some degree of change in one's lifestyle. And because one does see the need for lowering the amount of energy we're using and how much is being wasted, because all of a sudden now we know that every time that we click on the light switch, we are responsible for supplying that power as well. Off-grid usually also refers to using home materials, designs, and thinking that are a little bit of an upgrade from standard homes, because the goal is to moderate air temperatures in the house over the year and to find ways of heating water and so forth in ways that are also economically feasible. The one thing about, I also live off the grid myself, and if I was to be asked how much of my carbon footprint I have lowered, I must look at the building materials of my house, because they allow for at least 90% of my carbon footprint, which I will be offsetting and have offset by my nature-based solutions that I've applied on my property. So it's a whole new way of thinking. Now, historically, there were only basically three types of people that usually lived off the grid. A smaller number were the people who said, oh, I'm in it for the privacy. I want to keep living the way I am, and it doesn't matter how much energy I use because I can afford it. That's a very small number. A larger number are people who looked at their lifestyles and said, I really have to change. So my philosophy in life is to live more with the rhythms of nature and so forth. And so they go off the grid in lieu of a change of lifestyle. But mostly people in the past went off grid because they were forced to. They live in very remote areas, and it was just as economical to go off grid, and improving their house's ability to moderate temperatures came as a result of them trying to save money. But today we live in a different world. Now with the costs of lots of renewable energy, especially solar, have plummeted dramatically. And other areas, whether it's direct current appliances, devices, and equipment, have all stabilized. And the quality of building materials and the science involved with increasing home efficiency has improved dramatically. The basic problem has been and still remains is that who do you get to install and to build to the degree and to the qualifications of what you need in order to live off-grid lifestyle. Basically, we have chosen two families to visit in Grey County. Both have made quite incredible leaps in lowering their environmental footprint, and they've incorporated sustainable living habits and in an effort to decrease their waste. Each home is very unique, and as are the people who live there. Their insights and thinkings are not rocket science, and the knowledge is available to others. And if you ask them, they would say they probably lead normal lives. If you look during the events and the videos, you will see various small aspects and attributes of the house that on their own would not seem like big things, but when you add them up, they do add up to quite a lowering of their footprints. The one interesting thing is that all these small little areas is where any one of us can look at and say, can we incorporate some of these attributes and devices in our personal home as we live now. So basically, what I'd like to do now is to start the introduction. The first home that we went to see that we'll be presenting is the log home of David Brodie and Jill Smith Brodie in southern Grey County. Their home has been in the past and still is a B&B as well. And they were very delightful hosts. So what we did, we interviewed them, and they were very generous, and they gave us a nice tour. And I thank Kevin for following us along to get as much of each house, and especially of the first one, to get you to see the equipment and get a feel for the person and the family that's living in the home as much as what the home is. So if Kevin is ready to help me and present this to you, I would like to introduce our first video that we did over a month and a half ago, and that's the Brodie household. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this looks as well. So if Kevin would be nice enough to start us, let's see what how the Brodies are living. Well, we're at the home of David Brodie and Jill Smith Brodie.
Well, welcome, Vitold, to Toad Hall. So this is where we live in Grey Highlands. And so we are very close to Markdale, Ontario. We are on a no winter maintenance road, and we are about 2.2 kilometers from the nearest hydro line. When we bought this home in 1991, it actually was a vacant land. And we didn't decide to build for about 10 years. And because of the economics, it made sense for us to be building with a off-grid system to power our home. Because we are on basically pasture, we wanted to locate our home so we had to take advantage, or we could take advantage of some of the aesthetics of the property. So we have 2 ponds. So it wasn't just for the energy conservation concept of building the home and orienting the home, but also because we had some features we wanted to take advantage of. So you'll notice that the windows are predominantly on the west side of our home. Our home is built with log, which meets an R2000 requirement for efficiency. We also built it on top of a 10-inch concrete foundation, which gave us additional insulation for the lower level in the home. And so these were features which were important to us as we began the construction.
How did you initially power the house?
So the home was initially powered with, in fact, a cottage kit that was provided by a supplier. And so we began small and grew over time. And so it was originally powered with solar panels on the roof and a generator that we have just over to the east here of our home. And we primarily relied on that in the beginning. And it wasn't until there were system improvements, technology improvements, that we were able to grow our solar panels, and we actually took them off the roof for safety reasons.
Can you tell us the solar panels we're looking at, what are their sizes and how much power do they generate?
And so the first set of panels that we started with were 8, each delivering 105 watts. And then we doubled that to 16, and subsequent to that there was dramatic efficiency improvements and cost reductions. And so we've now had 4 generations of panels here, and you see here we have the last 2. A set of 9 that is delivering 230 watts, and another set of 9 that's 245 watts each.
To your left, I also hear the wind machine that you also installed. Can you tell us a little bit about that device?
Yes, so it's a wind turbine made by what was called Little Southwest Company back in the early 2000s. It delivers 3,200 watts of power at its maximum, and it was installed to supplement the solar system that we have. It doesn't stand alone by itself, but it's very good in off-season, and what I would call off-season is mainly in the winter time when we have very little sun here. It's not called Grey County for nothing.
And I assume, just like most people, that you want to be sure you have enough power 12 months of the year. So do these devices supply enough, or do you have any backup?
Yeah, so normally our solar panel for 8 months of the year provides all that we need. The wind turbine is very valuable to us in the winter months. We also require a generator, which is propane powered, to help us in those odd times when we do need power, so that we're never out of power. And when we ran a B&B, it was essential that our customers were never feeling like we were in a desperate situation. So today we hardly ever run it, but in those days we needed it.
And in your history of having both the solar and the wind, what kind of maintenance is required for them?
So the only maintenance that we require for solar panels is snow removal. For the wind turbine, it's a mechanical device. So we do require some maintenance of the blades, as they are subject to wear, just friction going through the air. And the generator still requires the normal, regular, routine maintenance that any machine would require. But if you have a very reliable supplier, as we do with Onan and their technical staff, it's been fantastic.
And basically, you did say you're more than 2 kilometers away from the nearest hydro hookup. So have you done any calculations as to what type of savings you have incurred by not hooking up as opposed to what you chose?
Well, the business case was very easy for the initial upfront capital cost. We would need in excess of 25 poles to come in here, so it would be over $250,000, and at the time our system was less than $30,000, so it was a very easy calculation. Today, our running costs are negligible, and we pay no hydro bill, so why don't we go inside and take a look?
Thank you. Well, thanks for inviting us into your home, David. This is a beautiful open concept home. How does it work for efficiency of heat?
So, Vitold, what we were interested in was using actually the wood from our property from a cost perspective, and we love the open concept of a room. This is where we live primarily. 80% of the time here is in this one great hall. And so this made sense for us. So this wood stove that you see here, it heats this entire house at the upper level to the point where we can be wearing t-shirts here in the wintertime. In the basement, we have installed a propane space heater requiring nothing more than a AA battery to power the thermostat, which is our safety valve for keeping this home heated should we leave and something happen to the forced air furnace that also is heating our home.
But I was, what came to my mind was that this looks just like any other normal home.
Well, in fact it is. And we've done nothing unusual here in the construction. It's normal log home construction with the stick frame gabling on for the roof, and the wiring is normal. All of the appliances in our kitchen are normal, save that they use propane. The stove uses propane as a heating energy supply, and same with our clothes dryer, and our water here are also powered by propane.
So was that part of your philosophy of, to get this efficiency, you use a diversity of power sources?
Yes, we certainly wanted to not be confined with electricity alone for powering the house. So if we ran short of power, we could still have no problem with heat, no problem with cooking in our kitchen, and control the amount of electricity that we use during times when we might have to be careful. I must say, I mean, I don't want to be obsessive about power conservation. I want to be mindful of it, but not controlled by it. So we wanted to run a home where you could feel like you're in a normal situation.
So your comfort levels do also include some things that you have decided not to have in your house.
Yes, so in order to simplify our power system, we have no 220 volt appliances. That was a decision we made, and it does not limit us in any way.
And I also do not see a dishwasher or a microwave.
No, that's for sure. So we don't have any of these appliances which are optional. I mean, you can do without easily without a dishwasher or a microwave. And in the case of a dishwasher, that just means Jill and I get to see one another after every meal.
And over the years that you've lived here, have you really experienced any difficulties with living without power?
So I must say there have been occasions when we have lost power, but they are few, and there are wonderful support systems from suppliers that we have been able to take advantage of. By and large, the technology works and works very well, and the number of times when we need extra support is extremely rare nowadays.
And I do believe that we have communicated back and forth using the internet, so you do have internet service and you watch TV and...
Absolutely. So it's satellite we use, for sure. And we use satellite for both television and for the internet. We can in fact stream using the internet. We certainly don't have the speeds that the city enjoys, but it can be done, and we are not limited in any way by technology.
Would I, if I may ask you, do you think that you have, by making the choices you have in your home, are living without and feel that you're not living the way that you may have wanted to?
No, I would say that we are living the dream that we always had of doing things environmentally responsibly. We have taken vacant land and turned it into what we think is a paradise. We are happy to be spending our retirement days in such a beautiful place, and we would like to continue to do so for as long as good health permits. And it's certainly nothing to do with the power supply that we have here at Toad Hall.
And what is the square footage of your house as far as living arrangements?
So it's we have 1,350 square feet on the main level and the loft, and we have an additional 600 square feet in the lower level, which we call our B&B area, which is where we used to run our bed and breakfast business.
Well, I think that I would like now to see the area and of where the power that is being generated outside is converted inside. Can you show us that?
Sure, let's go downstairs and take a look.
Well, David, now we're in the basement of your home, and we've entered a really significant part of your house, I imagine. Can you help us to let us know what we are looking at?
Sure. So this is what we call our utility room. If you were to look only at this panel, you would say this is a normal home with the fuse box for 110 volt system. It's only when you look to the right that you see all of the connections and the units particular to our off-grid power system.
And when were these actually put in, and how old are they?
So we're coming up on almost 20 years of service for some of these pieces of equipment. The heart of the system is the inverter, which takes the 48 volt DC power supply from our batteries and inverts it to the 110 volt that is required to power our home. And so this is the key to the unit, and this is now almost 2 decades old.
And I assume that power that is being generated in DC, you have some regulators or controllers that control how the power comes in and is stored?
Yes. So you noticed when we were outside that we have 2 sets of solar panels. That was done on purpose to give us some redundancy for solar energy supply. So we have 2 controllers, here and here, which control those panels separately. And they manage the power coming in from the solar panels and then supply into the battery bank.
And so basically, if you notice it's sunny outside in the middle of winter and you can look at those displays on these controllers, you can determine whether or not there's any snow on the panels.
We sure can. We know by the numbers that are coming in here where we are in terms of the supply of energy at any one time. When we begin in the morning, we are bulk charging from a battery bank that is basically consuming power during the night. And so we take all the energy in that we can. If there is snow on the panels, then the current coming in from the panels is low, and we go out inside and clean it, and we notice a jump right away. And then once the batteries start to fill up, then we enter into an absorption phase. And when we are almost full, then we enter into the trickle charge phase, where we are basically floating at a lower voltage and finish the charging until the end of the day.
Ken, can you explain some of the other little boxes that we're looking at on the wall?
Yes, so the upper control panel is the controller for our wind turbine. And it also needs to be controlled so that we stay within range. The winds are variable, so we often have gusts of wind which drive the current coming into the panel, into the system beyond what we want. So we will shut off that supply and send the power to a heat sink. And then after a few seconds, it will turn back on as the wind drops. You'll also see here a supply from a generator. So the generator requires some inversion as well, because it's a 220 volt generator. So we have a coil which will reduce that supply to the 110 volt, and then before it enters into the inverter.
And that generator you have, it is a Cummins?
It is indeed, yes. Under the Onan name, but certainly it's the Cummins company that owns that technology.
And the battery that you have, it stores?
So we have, it's a 48 volt system, and it is, we have arranged 6 volt batteries that are in series. So 8 batteries, 6 volt batteries give us our 48 volt system. And we have 2 series in parallel, which increase the amp hours or the capacity of our system to supply our home. And we normally would get over 2 days of power. If we had no input whatsoever, we could get 2 days of normal running of our home with all that we do, and still not jeopardize the condition of our batteries.
And this room is pretty much enclosed so that it is almost like a separate entity of your home dwelling.
Yes, so we deliberately placed this utility room within the home to an enclosed space. So there are no windows in here. It is below ground, so it will never freeze in here. We also know that because these are lead acid batteries, during certain times when we are equilibrating the batteries, it can create a hydrogen gas. So we have an exhaust which exhausts it to the air, and since hydrogen rises, you need nothing other than just to have an escape route for that. And so we certainly have no problems with that, and but we do want this room to be kept separate from the rest of the house.
Now this utility room, David, also has other appliances or items that you would normally find in a standard home.
So you would normally find HRV unit, a forced air furnace, and a water heater, but these are slightly different. So our furnace is powered by propane and is only run as a backup. It is not our primary source. Our wood burning stove is our primary source. The water heater is a direct vent water heater, so it requires no electricity to run that water heater, and it is also powered by propane.
And the last thing I wanted to see, and it looks like you're hiding it, but there's this little box to your right there. Can you tell us and just explain a little bit more about that?
So in this box are the batteries that we spoke of, and you'll notice that there are 16 batteries in here, and these batteries are lead acid type deep cycle batteries that you might find, say, on a boat or something like that, except that these are specific to off-grid homes.
And how do they compare to the lithium batteries as far as, because I understand that you cannot totally discharge these batteries, so it means a little bit of control and observance on your part.
Yeah, so we have certain set points which we must observe in these with lead acid batteries. So you must be managing the liquid levels in the battery. So it is a routine that we must go through, and once every 2 months I have to check and top up the water levels using distilled water for a battery. There's a 48 volt system, so we do set points to manage to those where we cannot go below certain set points for a specific length of time. We cannot go above certain set points when we are charging, except in exceptional circumstances like equalization. And we must do things like trickle charge at a particular voltage as well, at 54 volts, for example, in our situation. So once we set those, however, there's not a lot of work to it. It's just you have to know what you're managing to, and it's a matter of habit now. A part of your life you're always looking, and it's not onerous, but you have to look.
I would assume that this habit also overlaps into your recognition of when you turn on a light bulb or use an electrical item. Somewhere in your back of your mind you must say, well, this is how much power I have to be using out of the battery or be generating.
For sure. I think it's important to realize that you are consuming power that you're responsible for. It's not somebody else doing this for you. You are your own supplier of energy. So you become a little conscious of, I should be shutting off a light switch. When I use a hairdryer, and we do use hairdryers, you only use it for as long as you need it. You don't just run it because you think you might want to. And we're careful about those sorts of levels of consumption. There are certain things we do. We do iron, we do use a toaster. These are all just basically resistors that consume a lot of power. And we use them, but we use them with care. And having a system like this forces you to think of it.
It's almost like you have a form of discipline that is helping you in living the lifestyle that you want.
Yes, so as you mentioned earlier when we were upstairs, we don't have a dishwasher and we don't have a microwave. Microwave in particular is a big consumer of power. But we do have an iron, we do have hair dryers, and we do have a toaster, and we just manage the running of them. It's not something we take for granted.
Well, I thank you very much, Dave, for showing us this room. Is there anything else you'd like to add as to what a person who's looking at getting involved in using renewable energy in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I would highly recommend it to anyone who is conscious of the environment that we live in and our need to be more responsible for the world in which we are passing to our children and grandchildren. And this is one thing that an individual can do. And if you feel like you want to take on the challenge, I highly recommend it to you. It's very satisfying to do this sort of thing. And at the end of the day, my wife Jill and I are thrilled that we are doing our part, we think, to make the world just a little bit better.
Well, thank you very much, Dave.
You're welcome.
Well, that was quite an exciting tour of his place. A lot of information was given. We're going to have David here with us to answer any questions that may be posed to him. I will find out from Simona, when do you want to do this? You want to do it now, or do you want to put both homes together after we see the second house?
Well, welcome everyone. I do have one question, so maybe we can squeeze it in if everybody is cool with that. One question I got is, I'm curious to know the supplier of the solar panels. Are they still in business? How long will they last?
It's my understanding that we have David here. Is he available?
Let's see. I see that David is here.
There he is. Yep, David. Oh, unmute again, David.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the original supply, this is a Chinese supply company with a facility, I think it's in the London area. And the supplier that we had was Bruce Gray Solar, so John C. So he's out of Chatsworth. And so while John is still in business, he is older, so I don't think he's looking to expand his business a lot. So I think that's part of the challenge that we have, is encouraging new, younger people to get involved in this business. So that's, I mean, they are available, and if you're very handy, you can, of course, build a system on your own if you have engineering background, but I highly recommend you get somebody who has some experience like John in doing this sort of thing.
Right. And I got one more question, two actually, maybe more. What windmill did you use? I'm not sure if you said that, David.
Sorry, what
windmill? What type of windmill did you use?
Oh, the wind turbine. Yes. So the company was called Little Southwest at the time, but they were absorbed by another California company, and so there are many different technologies now, and I think, if I might say, that Vitold could probably tell you more, since he has been recently investigating this. So my knowledge about this now is a decade old, and I don't think that you need the height that we have. So our turbine is at 70 feet, and that was the limit that the local municipality would permit at the time. I don't think you need to go that high anymore, and I think actually there's probably more efficient units available today. And I would really advise some research into this before you just go with a standard twin blade setup that we have.
Right. Next question. Do you have a clothes dryer machine for your
Yes, we
clothing?
do. And yeah, we sure do. And it's also propane, using
Right.
propane to heat the box.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what led you to choose a 48 voltage system?
We wanted to make the inversion as small as possible, and we knew we were going to grow the system. So we deliberately chose 48 volt to allow that to happen. And we've not been disappointed by that. That said, I don't think in today's technology world you have to do that. I think it just opened up everything for us by making that choice. But I believe the technology for 24 volts is in today's world is equally acceptable, equally flexible.
Right, thank you. Next question, can you fully compensate for the lack of available solar energy in the winter with wind power?
That's an excellent question. That depends on the day, because wind is not, at least in our setup, wind is not as reliable. Wind, at least in our area, tends to be gusty. It's not steady. So if you were along the waterfront, you might get steady winds and it would be a better technology. But for us in an inland location, the winds tend to be extremely variable minute to minute. And so we are not, we do not fully compensate for solar with wind. We do use our generator, and that's the time when our generator is necessary for us, is when we are in periods with low solar input, such as December and January of every year. And then we do need from time to time to still run the generator. We still haven't found a way of managing the wind turbine to completely back up solar power when it's not available.
Mm-hmm. I'll have two quick questions. We will have to be on time for our next video. Can you tell us again how many panels you have with that voltage?
We have 18. 18. They are arranged, 18 total now.
Okay, and do you hear the turbine inside the house?
We do. But it's very determinate by the wind direction. So if the turbine is turning such that the wind is perpendicular to the house direction, that is to say the turbines are spinning towards us, then we hear it.
Okay.
If it's spinning in another direction where the turbines are pointing away from us, or perpendicular to us, then we don't hear them.
Thank you, David. Well, I think that we are up to the time. There is one more quick question. How much work is involved in clearing the solar panels of snow and ice? Do you go up there during the sunny days and clear the snow?
We go out every morning to clear the snow. And it seems like we get snowed on every day here or in the snow belt area. Once again, that depends on the snow. We have to remember that snow is not snow. Snow can be wet, it can be dry, it can be very cold and not stick to the panels. It can be quite damp, and then everything seems to stick. So it's not a yes or no answer. Some days we go out thinking that it's covered in snow and we find it's completely clear because the wind is blowing it clear. Other days we go out and there's 6 inches of snow on the panels because it's just wet snow, no wind, and it's just fall plop onto the panels, and you got to get that off. And
Right.
sometimes it freezes on the panels and you don't get it off. You have to wait for the sun to do that. You take off the loose snow and you accept that it's going to take a few hours for the sun to heat up the panel and remove the snow itself.
Well, thank you very much, David, and I'll pass the word to Vitold now.
Well, thank you very much, David and Simona. I know what David is saying because I, in the winter, get my 2 or 3 times a week exercise by taking snow off my solar panels as well. The one interesting thing is that you will see both with David and with our next video that each of these homes are a hybrid upon themselves, totally reflective of the individuals thinking who are living inside and or who have built the home. And in my time in Grey County, I've been living here since the mid 80s. I have visited in Grey, Bruce, Huron, Perth, and Simcoe. I have visited more than 40 homes that are off grid. Many of them are still in operation. Some have been passed on to the next. And so I just tried to give 2 relevant, 2 quite different homes for our tonight's session. So, and the one good thing is that if one wants to study what it takes to be off-grid in the area, you choose other areas, whether they're in Europe or whatever, that or in Michigan, Minnesota, that have comparable weather to us. And you'll find there are hundreds and hundreds of opportunities, books, articles, and videos on various people that have done something similar. But I thank Dave very much for what he did. Our next home that Kevin will be putting on the screen shortly is the home of Lynn Stoltzfus and Christine Forand. This is a straw bale home. When they were building the home, they were a young family. I think they already had 1 child born and 1 was on the way. And they offer a quite a different perspective to give you and to show you the diversity of people's thinking and what they're looking at as far as a home that they want to call their home for the long term. So what I'd like to do now is give it over to Kevin, if he would be kind enough to show the rest of us or all of us and we be introduced to the home of Lynn and Christine. Take it away, Kevin.
Good day, and today we are fortunate to be in the home of Lynn Stoltzfus and Christine Forand. Thank you, Lynn, for inviting us into your off-grid home. I imagine that when you built this off-grid home, you had a family that would have to live in the same method and the same habits that you wanted to live by.
Yeah, so when we built the house, our first daughter was 2.5 years old, and our second daughter was born a year or 2 after we had been living in the house. So they haven't known any other way of living here anymore.
So for them, this is normal.
It is. Sometimes it's not the most exciting when they can't do everything that they want to with electronically, but again, it's just how we live.
Can I ask you, Lynn, how you came to the conclusion that you wanted to live in an off-grid home?
So in the mid-90s, my parents moved to the middle of nowhere in Utah and built an off-grid house. And so I had their experience that helped inform our decision. When we were looking for property, we found this place, and the nearest hydro was 1 kilometer away, so that made the decision quite easy, because to bring the hydro in would have cost more than it cost to set up our off-grid system. So
Now, when did you and how build this home, and how old is the home?
So we started building in 2005, and we moved in November of 2006. And when we moved in, it was pretty much a shell. The exterior walls were the only thing that was there, so it was insulated, but that was about it. And so we've been building it over the last 13 or 14 years.
Well, it definitely looks finished to me. I mean,
It's getting a lot closer.
And can you give me an idea that, I understand that you also took a great role in the building of the house and its construction.
We basically built the house ourselves. We had help from friends, and we had some help doing some of the plastering on the inside of the house, but mostly we did it ourselves.
And just so people would know, the walls are extremely thick. What is the basis of the house?
So it's a straw bale construction. So the walls are 16 inches thick. There's an inch of plaster on the inside, an inch of plaster on the outside, covering the straw bales, which protects them. We've also added a layer of siding on the outside to further protect the plaster from rain. We did have a little bit of problem with water getting into the straw, and so that's why we put the siding on the outside of the house.
And the power that you do use, I assume, most people think that living off-grid means that you live by candlelight and a little twig of wood here into the fire. What are your power sources for the house?
So we have about 1,000 watts of solar panels and a 1 kilowatt wind generator, which the wind generator does a lot more for us in the winter than it does in the summer, and obviously the sun doesn't shine as much in the winter either. So we find that the two together make a pretty good balance. We do have a backup gas-powered generator that we use on average probably between 6 and 10 times a year. So it's not very often, and yeah.
I was going to ask it right there, is that how often have you found you and your family suffering because that it was an outage of some sort or not enough? I mean,
virtually never. If we need to run the gas generator, we run the gas generator. We basically there's two things you have to think about when you're designing an off-grid house and a system. Is the biggest things that use power are to make heat with electricity and refrigeration. So those are the two main things that are going to continuously use power. Turning on an LED light bulb that uses 10 watts, it's almost nothing in the size of a system like this. So lights are never a problem. So refrigeration, we have a 24-volt DC refrigerator, which is really efficient. It has a really efficient compressor, and in the basement we have a small freezer that we use for storing food. So those are, the fridge and the freezer are probably the biggest things that make electricity for us, or that use electricity for us.
And is this a crazy question, or do you have to freeze during showers because of cold water?
So our system doesn't use any electricity or any other kinds of power to make hot water. We have a dual hot water system. In the summer, we have hot water made by the sun, which is usually plenty of hot water. We have two actual systems. We have a batch water heater, which heats water for the kitchen sink. So it's a tank under glass that heats the water in the tank directly from the sun. And then we have a solar thermal panel, which heats water that circulates to a tank that we have upstairs. And so the difference in elevation is what circulates the water. Heat rises, so the hot water goes up to the tank that we have upstairs. And so we don't have to use any power to circulate the water with that. When the sun shines, it circulates water and heats the tank upstairs. And we use that same system all winter with our wood stove, which has a water jacket in it. And so when we make a fire, it heats the water in the water jacket, which pushes up the pipes to the tank upstairs where the hot water is stored. And so in the summer, if we have 3 or 4 days that are cloudy in a row, the water's not very warm, but it's not as cold as it would be otherwise. But
And-
typically, we have all the hot water we need.
Excellent. And the one thing I noticed, now we're here visiting you near the end of October, and I had to take my coat off and my sweater almost off because all of a sudden I have all this extra heat coming at me. And so besides the sun, which I assume is important, what is your main source of heat?
The only source of heat that we have is a wood stove. So we make fires when it's cold, and it heats the house, and yeah, we're fine.
And how does the construction of the house maintain the heat in all the various areas of it?
So because a straw bale wall like we have is roughly equivalent to an R34 wall, so it's insulated well beyond what the building code would require. So it's very well insulated to start with. There's also the skin of plaster on the inside of the house acts as a thermal mass, which retains the heat that the fire would make. So it makes sure the house doesn't cool off as far or heat up as quickly when you make a fire. So it kind of equalizes the temperature a little bit better than it would otherwise.
Now, I also noticed right beside you, there's lots of peppers, and in other areas of the home, I see tremendous harvest from, I assume you have a wonderful greenhouse and or garden. As we were coming in, I also noticed that you probably supply most of your food.
We do grow most of our own vegetables, not 100%, but the vast majority of vegetables that we eat, we grow here. We do have a big garden, which has a greenhouse. We also have a small greenhouse attached to the basement, which provides winter greens primarily. This stuff that greens during the winter when it's hard to grow outside.
And I assume that greenhouse has a very large southern exposure?
Yeah, it does. The problem we have here is we're a little bit close to the forest on the east, so the east sun doesn't get there very quickly in the morning. But yeah, it has a lot of south-facing glass on it.
And I also noticed that you have good food storage areas, especially in the basement.
Yeah, so in the basement we designed to have 3 areas to store food. We have 2 cold rooms, which are ventilated to the outside. They have a small fan in a 4-inch pipe. There's an inlet and an outlet. So the inlet brings in cold air and the outlet draws out the warm air. Primarily because the cold rooms don't get cold enough soon enough to store some of the stuff that would grow in the garden that needs to come out of the garden before it's completely covered in snow. So we have 2 cold rooms for different kinds of fruits and vegetables, and then we have a pantry which has all of our canning supplies.
I must tell you, I walked by there, and please don't examine my pockets as I'm leaving. The one thing I also noticed is that you have a composting toilet system.
We do. So when we built the house, I had been reading various things and decided that I didn't want to pollute drinking water with human waste. So we have what's called a bucket toilet system. So in where the toilet would normally be, there's a bucket. And every time you make a deposit in the bucket, you cover it with sawdust. And when the bucket gets full enough, we take it outside and empty it into a barrel. When the barrel's full, it stays in the barrel for a calendar year to completely compost. But as an added precaution, we don't put that on any of our vegetable garden. We use that in our orchard on fruit trees. And the chickens are there scratching it around, so they're continuing to help the composting of anything that's left in it. So yeah, we're taking the fertility that we create and using it to grow our orchard.
And what is the basis of your power that you use in the house as far as, are you do you have to use standard or AC appliances, or do you have just DC appliances?
So we set up our system to have, basically the house is wired like any other house. It has AC wiring everywhere, up to code, but we also added some DC circuits. So there are places that you can plug in certain things to direct current. So things like a cordless phone, it plugs directly into the DC circuit. The reason for that is a small load will make the inverter run. The inverter is what transfers current from AC or DC to AC, from the batteries to AC power. And anything that has, if the inverter's turned on, it's using 50 watts. So if you have something that's using 3 watts and you have the inverter on, the inverter is using a vast amount more power than the actual load. So anything like that that's on all the time, like the cordless phone, it plugs directly into direct current. So it doesn't keep the inverter running.
And I would assume that your philosophy of life has been one that you probably indirectly or consciously or unconsciously live a lifestyle that would be using less energy.
Yeah, you have to, if you want to live successfully off-grid, you have to use less power than you would if you were connected to the grid. You have to find ways to use less power, whether it's more efficient appliances or not using electricity to create heat, things like that. Yeah, and the other thing is you use power when you have it. So we have a laundry machine, but we only use it really when the sun's shining, which also means that the clothes will dry well outside. In the winter, we do laundry when the sun's shining or the wind's blowing, because that's when we have power to do it. So there are certain things that you can plan when you do them based on when you have power to use them.
Now, you were talking about laundry. I would assume that on those days in the winter or when it's not easy to put laundry that's wet so that you get back a sheet of ice, you also are very ingenious. I see that you also have a drying system inside the house.
So soon after we had moved into the house, our second daughter was born and had diapers. And so that means a lot of laundry. So in order to keep dry diapers available for putting on her, I designed a rack that raises and lowers near the wood stove. So you can lower it to load all the adult laundry onto it, and then you raise it up and it's out of the way, and so we don't have to be running into it or walking around a clothes rack most of the time.
Well, I must admit that this is a very cozy place that we are having this discussion, and this is where you live all the time.
It is. We really like our house.
I hope that you will invite us to see maybe some of the mechanical utility room type of mechanics, and also I saw some wonderful things outside. Will you
Absolutely
lead us there?
We can show you all the things we have.
Because that's part of your home, right?
It is, yeah.
Well, thank you. We're back with Lynn, and in front of his home, that his basic form of construction was a straw bale. Lynn, can you explain to us what is involved with straw bale?
So this particular kind of straw bale construction uses a modified post and beam structure that's buried inside the straw wall. So there's 2x4s and 2x6 with plywood skin on both sides, making a post that holds up a beam, which is 2x6 and plywood sandwiched together the opposite direction. And so you basically make a structure that supports the roof and the floor before you start putting the straw bales into it. So then the straw bales go between your posts, fill the columns completely with straw, and then a mesh goes on the inside and the outside, and then the plaster is applied to that mesh and to the straw, directly to the straw and mesh. So in this kind of system, you have to use a cement lime plaster because the skin on the bale walls is also the structural bracing for the house to keep it from flopping around. So that's essentially this kind of construction. The straw is infill inside the post and beam structure, and the skin of the plaster is the structural bracing.
And how long of a period of time did it take for this form of construction as opposed to, I'd say, conventional?
In a typical straw bale house, this kind of construction would take 25% more labor in terms of labor cost. So the straw itself isn't an expense, a very big expense, because it's something that's pretty readily available. But the labor it does take longer than a typical house.
So the
build.
straw you get from local farms, I assume?
Yeah, we got ours from a farmer near Durham. So, yeah.
So the actual material cost would be significantly less, but the labor cost, you're saying?
That's correct. It takes longer and there's more labor involved.
And what again is the R factor of the straw bale construction?
So this wall system is about an R34. So a typical 2x6 wall would be R20 to 22. And for code, you have to get up to R28. So this is exceeding what the current Ontario building code is.
Do you see a future in straw bale construction in our area?
I think it was pioneered in the southwest of the U.S., and I think that's probably where it probably has its best home. The amount of rain we get and the humidity and the weather is not as conducive for straw bale here as it would be in a drier climate, I would say. Particularly the problems we had with the cracks in the plaster allowing water into the straw, which is why we've covered them up with siding.
Well, I thank you very much, Lynn, for doing a little explanation on straw bale.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have with us Christine. You are the other half of the family that made the decision to be here. Thanks for allowing us to be in your backyard.
Yeah,
We're surrounded by many, many things besides the wind machine to your right, and behind us we have the solar panels. But I need to ask you your impression as to what changes or limitations in life you've had to experience.
Well, for the most part, I absolutely adore living off grid, and I think the main things are just occasionally, several days in a row where you don't have sun. We don't like to turn the generator on, but every once in a while you have to. I can't run the vacuum cleaner as often as I would like to. Have to wait till we have power. Our fridge is tiny because it's super efficient, and that can be difficult in the summertime, especially when our cold rooms are not cold enough to put excess stuff down there, which we do all winter. We just have to be very careful about what we harvest and not harvest too much, and just that kind of thing. But, for the most part, most things are manageable. Different things like running our Vitamix, that can only happen when we've got power. We just have to adapt.
So it sounds like you have to be very conscious of, if you're going to use something that requires power or energy, that you have it.
That's right. Yeah, it's a consciousness that even our kids have adopted, to know, oh, can I do this activity? Look at the batteries, check out, where we're at, look outside, look at the sun.
Can I ask, I get the impression that you're probably the lead gardener in this household.
I wouldn't exactly say that. It's very much a shared operation, but I have a bit more time in the summer to spend out there.
And can you tell us some of the things that you do harvest?
We harvest everything. The only things that are left to harvest now, for example, are leeks and Brussels sprouts, cabbage, carrots, parsnip, rutabaga, celeriac, kale. So everything else has been harvested. Tomatoes, potatoes, beets, squash, garlic, onions.
So you basically plan your meals when you're planting the seeds.
To some extent, yes.
Excellent. Now, the other thing I noticed right beside us, in addition to the garden, is the greenhouse that you have.
Yes. It's a fairly small greenhouse, but we are able to plant a lot in there. It's a 12 by 40 foot greenhouse, and we probably had about 60 tomato plants, about 30 or maybe 40 pepper plants, about 15 green eggplants, and a few cucumber plants in there as well.
Now, did I just see an orchard?
Yes, our orchard has been growing and maturing slowly but surely, and Lynn is very much responsible for the orchard, but we have planted apples, pears, plums, and hazelnuts. Those are the main ones. We have next to the orchard our berry patch, so we have all different kinds of berries in there, and those have been very successful. The orchard, it's hard. It's hard growing an organic orchard. There's a lot of pests who are interested in what we're growing over there. But slowly but surely we're learning, and we have a really great irrigation system in place there, and so the harvest has been better and better every year.
Now, did I hear some chickens as well?
Yeah, the chickens are in the orchard, and we have a fenced-in area for them, and they share the space with the orchard. They're mostly our laying hens that are there year-round, so we get our eggs from them. And then in summer we do raise meat birds.
Well, you know, and can I ask you, Christine, what's this device just to your right? Is that what you were talking about, or Lynn was talking about, like a solar dehydrator?
Yeah, exactly. That Lynn built several years ago, actually even before we moved here. And we dry pretty much most of the produce that we grow, and also a lot of fruits that we purchase from Niagara, and our own apples and pears. We do a lot of canning, and we do freeze some things, but we also, just in terms of space, our freezer is also small, and the dehydrated stuff is actually great. It maintains the nutrients really well, more than other ways to preserve, actually. So it's great. It's a great addition, and sometimes really easy. Make a soup, just throw all your dehydrated veggies in there, and you know, your soup stock or whatever.
Well, it sounds to me like that no matter what time of the year, if something critical happens that you can't move around, snowstorm, blizzard, or whatever, I could come over here and live here for weeks and not have to go to the outside world.
Yes, you could. Several people could. We're pretty set up for a little while.
What has been some of your experiences, especially with the straw bale construction and the home in general?
Yeah, the building itself was a lot of work. It's a pretty labor-intensive way to build a house, and you know, thankfully we had lots of friends and family pitch in, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Because time was also an issue, and the fall encroaching, we weren't able to necessarily protect the straw bales from the outside elements as best as we could have initially, and also long-term. We had to replace a couple of the walls, which was pretty devastating emotionally and mentally and physically, and eventually go to the system that we have now, which is the siding over top of the exterior bales, which we should have done it from the beginning, but we didn't realize that it would be necessary, and we also didn't have time.
Well, I really would like to ask you, in conclusion, do you have any advice to offer someone who could be watching that is interested in doing some of the things that you and Lynn have done? What kind of advice would you give us?
Yeah, I suppose to spend as much time as you can doing your research and talking to a lot of people who, if it's living off grid that you're interested in, talk to people who live off grid. Know what you're getting into, and if it's straw bale construction, talk to people who built straw bale, and get as many different opinions and ideas and suggestions and feedback from people. If it's, you know, gardening and homesteading, well, that comes with time, and you learn as you go, and you know, but also there's a lot of experience out there. People have been doing it for a long time, and there's different ways to do it. Some ways are more maybe labor intensive than others, so it just depends how you know, what your goals are.
Well, I must thank you, Christine, and your husband Lynn, for sharing your time with us today.
Thanks, it's been great.
that was another good visit that Kevin and I had at the farm, at their home. Their home is actually in West Gray, just west of number 6 highway. And they have been living there for well over a decade. So I believe, but I think that we can get questions again. And I believe we have either Lynn or Christine here, if someone could help me to locate them. And if there's any questions that they would be willing to answer. I may say, while we're waiting for this to happen, is that some of the questions that were left, maybe not totally answered from David, may be answered in our next event in 2 weeks from now, when we will be talking to people who are in that industry. So do we have any questions for Lynn or Christine, if they are here?
We're here.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
there you are. Perfect.
Welcome, Lynn, and the team. I do have a question for you. There was a question. Can you please provide some detail on the solar thermal heater, vacuum tube, flat plate? Is there a typical best case BTU production number on a sunny day in June?
So I built the solar thermal panel myself, so it has no ratings whatsoever on it. I know that it makes the water warmer than it was before. On a typical sunny day in June, the 50-gallon tank we have upstairs will heat maybe 10 degrees Celsius from where it was at the beginning of the day to the end of the day. I don't really know how many BTUs that is. I know that the water is warm when it comes out at the shower, and that's what matters to me. So it has no specifications because I built it myself. The batch water heater is the same way. It's a 42-gallon tank in glass. On a hot day in June, a sunny day in June, the water that comes out of the kitchen tap can be up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So it heats the water quite sufficiently in that respect. Yeah, but in terms of actual specifications, I have no idea how many BTUs either would produce.
Right. Well, then, thank you. The next question I have here is somebody's wondering, how do you ventilate your house since you have a high R value? How breathable is your house?
So our house has a similar system to Vitold's house, which we copied from the same person that Vitold copied his from. And it's basically pipes buried underground that bring fresh air into the house. So when we're burning our wood stove, it's drawing air out of the house. And so because there's these pipes that are open to the outside, that's the easiest way for air to come in. So it's going to draw air through those pipes. And because they're underground, the ground preheats the air as it's traveling through those pipes. So we decided not to put a HRV unit in. So, but we have these pipes underground that are bringing fresh air into the house.
Right. Great. Somebody says, I'm curious, if you had to do it again, would there be any alternative building material you would use, given the problems with straw bale you had?
Go ahead.
Lynn and I don't have the same opinion about this. Replacing the walls was really demoralizing, and I said I would never do it again. But now that we're 15 years in and the house is great and protected, I love our house, I would maybe do it again, but I would do what we did in the end to protect the walls from the get-go. Lynn would do it in a different way, I think.
There's ways to build a straw bale house that would keep it from having the problems that we had. So there are ways to build a straw bale house that would be fine. But and one of what we did in the end is one of those ways, but there are other ways. In terms of other alternative building materials, I don't know that that I would actually feel comfortable trying to build any of the other ones. There are like a light straw clay pressed into a slip form. So there are other things out there, but yeah, I don't know enough about them and I don't have direct experience with them, so I wouldn't really recommend one over another.
I guess I would also add that our ecological footprint with this house, because of the amount of cement that we used, isn't very small, and I don't feel that great about that. There are other ways you can plaster using different clay and whatnot, but the way that we built, we needed to have the cement lime plaster for the structural integrity. So there's like give and takes, and I guess it's all a part of the decision. So yeah, there's no one easy way or one easy answer. But I do feel the weight of the cement that we've used as a, it's a non-renewable resource that's pretty energy intensive. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your answers. Comment about your daughter. She keeps smiling and sitting between you. How did she like growing up in the house that's being built? What's her comments?
I mean, it's normal for me because I've always lived here.
Cool.
It's just
Good answer.
She was making fires and heating the house by the age of 10 easily. So she's learned what she needs to do to live here, and she gets home from school and we're not home yet. She wants a warm house. She has to get a fire going.
Well, I would say it's unbelievable education. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have any passive solar heat?
We have windows on the south side of our house. So to that extent, yeah. The problem is when you need heat is when the sun doesn't typically shine here in Grey County. So yeah. When it's a sunny day in the winter, the fire definitely goes out and we don't add wood until the evening because there is definitely warmth from the sun coming into the house. But anyone with south facing windows is going to have that same thing to some extent or another.
Right. Seems like I don't have any questions right now, but personally, I would like to make a comment that I like what you said at the beginning about the consciousness, because if you have unlimited energy in your house, you're not that conscious as if you would not have it unlimited. So it was quite good point right there that in the conventional house, we don't have that consciousness as much unless you're on different thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my takeaway.
And I also, I'd like to just say a word of thank you to Lynn, to Christine, and to David for not only taking the time to allow all of us into their home and to see all their dirty laundry and ways of living, but also for coming here tonight to answer any questions. That's the one thing that I found in my history of going to people's homes that are living off grid or are living slightly differently from the norm, that they are very generous with their time. It's almost like I keep hearing from them, well, we learned this and now we'd like to share it with others. And if it has any impact to help other people, even minorly, that would be just wonderful. So I thank both families, and I know that that we didn't see Jill Smith Brodie on, but even when we were at the Brodie house, the reason we didn't see her because she was taking care of the dog that she knew would be jumping all over us during the interview. And so I thank both families very much for sharing their time and their homes. And I'm sure that if people want to know further information about them, I know that they probably would not want to have a whole parade of cars entering their driveway. So if you want to pass any further questions or suggestions to us, and I will make sure that I pass it on to them, and that they can respond to any of you in the future. So I thank them both, and this is going to lead into our event, which will happen in 2 weeks' time, where we will get into those individuals and those companies that will offer services, products, and ideas to help individuals not only go off the grid, but make any type of retrofits or changes to their existing homes that will help in their home energy efficiency. So I think that we're getting near our end of time. I think also Simone, you did a wonderful job. Kevin, you did really great. And I really appreciate all the support that you've given me in bringing this information to others. And so Barry, I think I can pass it on to you, and I thank all of you who took the time to be with us tonight.
Okay, thank you, Vitold. And I also want to just say thanks to everyone that's been involved, and over, well, close to 50 people that showed up for the event tonight. And as anybody that's gone into the chat room can see, that we've posted links there on the Eventbrite channel, Eventbrite site, where you can register, and that you register for all the events, and that gives us your email, which allows us to stay in touch with you and send you the links. We, prior to an event, if it's too late, you can just email our GB SusNet email and we can send you the link. But ideally, everybody goes on and registers for all the events. And as Vitold said, December 1st is the next event, where we have Dan Blinkenskop from Registered Energy Auditor, Chris Vanderhoot from Evolve Builders, Luke Cook from Cook's Plumbing and Heating, and Santo Quarantone and Carl Bell from Grassroots Solar. So it's the second in the series of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And if you go on our website, gbsusnet.com, you'll see the whole list of the next 8 or 9 events that will cover topics ranging from food and agriculture and food distribution, alternative transportation, zero waste community and initiatives, carbon sequestration, and nature-based solutions, all of which help us fulfill our mandate as a regional sustainability organization. We've been, for over, 12 years now, we've been working in the Grey Bruce area, promoting people connecting with each other, but also implementing projects on the ground that build more resilient communities and reduce emissions and adapt to the problems related to climate change. And of course, in this world that we live in, it's not the only problem that we face. But as we get through the pandemic that we're in, we will resurface. But the message I'm getting is that we need to resurface in something called a new normal, which actually is going to be positive in terms of responding to climate change, but also will help us get through this pandemic. So keep on walking, get outside, breathe fresh air, and have fun with your family. That's whatever your family happens to be. So unless anybody else from the team has got any last 2 cents to throw in, or 25 cents, I'll once again thank all the contributors and our hosts and say so long. Okay, thanks again.